Good afternoon, Facebook friends, and welcome to our Monday Mix. My name is Ruth from Top Schools, and let's just dive straight into this. I've been having a guest, and this week I'm very delighted to welcome my colleague, Nicola. Hi, Nicola.
Hi, Ruth. Hi, everybody.
Okay. So, Nicola, you entered the Facebook group, I think, last week or a couple of weeks ago. So not in love with Facebook, shall we be honest, but about to take a much more active role. So, Nicola, just tell us a little bit about yourself and your work with Top Schools.
Okay, so I joined Top Schools about 5 years ago now. And in that time, I've obviously worked with numerous families, some of them based in Hong Kong, who may have been here for years and recently become parents and are beginning to navigate their journey through international schools here. Others that are relocating and finding themselves suddenly thrown into the craziness that we consider the Hong Kong international school scene.
Right. So, and we still have families relocating this coming August as well, which is kind of surprising. But
yeah, maybe less surprising this year. I think we've seen a really unusual year in all aspects. Families that were perhaps planning on relocating to Hong Kong and for various reasons towards the end of last year and obviously into this year, put the brakes on that. And as the global situation has changed, we've seen obviously more families moving in, families that were perhaps looking to leave Hong Kong are now well and truly back with us.
So the boomerangs.
So it's been an interesting few months.
Okay, so the purpose of this, thank you for watching. If you're watching live, please ask a question. We've got some questions coming in. And if you're also watching this on catch up, we'll try to get to the questions as well. So basically what Nicola doesn't know about schools in Hong Kong really isn't worth knowing. I mean, she really is an expert in the truest sense of the word. And so I just wanted to, for the wider sort of Hong Kong schools community, to meet Nicola. And you can throw anything at Nicola and let's see. So we have some questions, Nick.
The gauntlet's been thrown down.
So I'm just going to go straight in, and this is in no particular order. So hi, Mark. Thank you for your questions. Nicola, can you read that?
I can, yeah. So for British schools, do both parents having a British citizenship versus just one play a factor in admitting the child? I myself am a British passport holder. The reality is it's not the passport of the parents that is usually the determining factor. It's the passport of the child. So as long as the child is holding usually a non-Hong Kong passport, when we look at the international schools, sadly, being British doesn't really give much specific advantage other than it's a non-Hong Kong passport. So in short, it's not the parent's passport that's important, it's the child's.
Right. So, I mean, we've obviously seen families. So in certain cases, one of the questions that we will ask early on is your child entitled to any other passport or even citizenship, because sometimes that can actually work in their favor as well. So we've worked with families where they actually applied for the passport, and by the time they actually came to apply, we actually stated the child as a foreign national, and then by the time they came to provide the proof, that proof was already we had that proof. So thank you for your question, Mark. Let's see. So this is quite a long one. Interested to know if any international schools located on Kowloon that have a strong Chinese program. So this is your forte, Nicola. And for those of you that don't know, both Nicola and myself put non-Chinese children through Chinese primary schools. So Tiffany is considering Victoria, since it has a strong Chinese program, but primary and secondary is located on Hong Kong Island, which is very far.
Okay, so obviously in the context of international schools, we are usually referring to Chinese being Mandarin and not as Cantonese, and that's something to bear in mind. However, we see international schools, some of them use traditional characters and some of them use simplified for that teaching of Mandarin, and that might be something that you want to look into. There's also schools, Kowloon side, that might use or do use English and Cantonese in their preschool section before moving on to being English Mandarin in their primary and secondary school. I don't know if are we naming?
Well, Tiffany's named Victoria, and let's have a chat about Victoria, because I mean, how many Victoria parents do we work with?
A lot.
A lot. Like, yeah, and in the past week alone, I mean, we must have had more than a dozen inquiries from K2 Victoria parents. So, Tiffany, I think that there's two steps to the answer to this. That is, if you do go into Victoria, then which flavour of Victoria? And then, of course, what's next is what you're asking. But I think we need to rewind and actually consider, first of all, which flavour of Victoria are you considering? Now, you're already on the Kowloon side. Nicola, what do you think?
In terms of trilingual or the bilingual programs, obviously there's a limited number of options, definitely in terms of session, and bilingual really only becoming available when they join K1 and above. On Kowloon side, there's not as much option in that bilingual program. And of course, that we would always be advising that you really do need to be looking ahead to your primary school selection. And is that preschool going to give you what you need in terms of priority, also in terms of language exposure? And that's going to be a balance as well with what's happening with your home languages to ensure that your child meets the requisite proficiency.
Right. So, Tiffany, I think it would be really helpful if you just let us know. I'm going to make an assumption, because we live in Hong Kong, that you're a Cantonese-speaking family, and most of Victoria classes, excuse me, are Cantonese. So is that going to provide your child with enough English and or Mandarin to see him or her transition very easily into Victoria Shanghai Academy? And also, having said all of that as well, there are plenty of kids that commute from Kowloon to VSA, and the Victoria organisation is expanding, so watch this space. But thank you for your comment, Tiffany. Wow, lots of comments. Is it Mo Fei? Hi, Nicola, Ruth. If we speak Mandarin at home and we would like our kid to go to local for primary, but then to international for secondary by supplementing English tutorials at home, is there a good chance that this would be achievable? And when would be a good time for transitioning out to international from primary, I guess? Yeah.
Okay, a tough one. Perhaps a tiny bit of personal sharing is that my daughter, and actually now my youngest son, are at a local curriculum Mandarin immersion program. And my daughter did successfully transfer out to an English medium school for year 6, but it's not as easy. When you look at the entry requirements for international schools, when they're very, very young, with the focus is very much on developmental milestones being met and receptive and expressive English language skills. Obviously, as they get older, it's much more based on their ability to not just read, but write and really understand and use English as the medium for academic learning, which is very, very different compared to a local school. If you are coming from a Mandarin-speaking household and you're at a local school, I would question realistically how much time you're going to have for authentic native exposure to the level that would be required for entry to an international school, right? Second half of primary or secondary.
Yeah, so Mofe's mentioned English tutorials. Thank you for your question, Mofe, and she also knows where your children go to school, Nicola. Should we talk a little bit about that, about transferring in a general sense? I mean, we obviously meet a lot of children. I mean, we work with parents who've got children from 0 or in the womb up to, I mean, we've got currently a child transitioning into year 12, and that's about the oldest that we tend to work with. But a lot of parents, children aged 9, 10, 11, and they're thinking about switching into an international primary school from local. Can you talk a little bit about that?
In terms of what's expected, it varies. Obviously, each international school is going to be slightly different in what they require. We are obviously seeing far more of the standardized testing being used by the international schools as we get through, definitely from year 3 and above, whether that be an INCAS test, whether it be a MAP test, whether it be a CAT 4 test.
Right. This is all jargon, but these are all standardized tests that the schools will use. Yeah.
And obviously they're all in English. So it's not just about being able to use English for a standalone lesson. It's about being able to demonstrate your competency and ability to learn in that language,
Right.
which is, yeah.
What's the most challenging part then? I mean, you did it, but maybe your situation is a little bit different because you're native English-speaking family. But so from the clients, what is the most challenging part of that from a child transitioning from local to international? And why do they sometimes not make it?
There are several steps in that process that are challenging. Obviously, the first step is securing the international school's place, at which point I think parents need to be realistic. I am fully supportive at many levels of why parents choose a local school or a school that's very strong in Chinese for the lower primary or all of their child's primary education. But you need to then be realistic as to the capabilities of your child to pass the entry requirements for different international schools. And it may be a case that we're looking at a stepping stone or a transition school that is going to give that English medium of instruction, potentially have the support in place to help those children. And obviously, once you've secured that place, that's just one hurdle. The second hurdle being how successful your child is going to be in a particular classroom after they've come out of the local school. And that's not just English. And I think it's been touched on in the question, whether creativity, the ability to really thrive in a very different learning environment.
Right. I mean, thank you for your question, Mofe. It's a super common question. And I think that for me, one of the warning is the word tutorial, really. So what we would say in summary is that you're not looking for your child to learn English, but ideally you're looking for opportunities for your child to learn in English. So, if you know that if you push a child to do too many tutorials and learning grammar and learning English, especially if it's English that's aimed at a second language, that might not actually help. So I don't know how old your child is, but
I'd probably add on, you wouldn't be looking at an English tutorial in a sense of teaching subjective pronouns, because they're probably very good at that coming out of a local school. But whether you're working on creative writing, your comprehension and use of language, but I'd definitely be steering away from tutorial per se.
Yeah. So that leads me on to the next question, Nicola. What are the main reasons that children don't pass assessments at international schools?
Is this across all age groups?
Shall we say primary?
Okay, so usually for most schools, not all, they are looking to take as many children as they possibly can. They'd love to take your child. There are obviously requirements that they need each child to make so that they can be successful in their school and in that classroom and with those peers and the support that they have available. So if we look at the very youngest children going into primary, again, receptive and expressive English language skills are going to be key. And we're looking at normal, for want of a better term, developmental milestones to be met. Now, disclosure during the course of an application as to whether your child needs any additional support or has previously received any is really key in framing the teachers and the admissions department's expectations for that child.
Yeah, it is actually. So just to summarize, I mean, Nicola and I and the other consultants here, we often summarize it's basically lack of English ability and or other individual learning needs that the school feels either weren't disclosed or that they see. We always say, did you say disclosure is better than discovery? Okay, so that's something that we say a lot. So lots more questions about this is so common. It's a Mandarin programs. So go for it, Nicola.
How are the Mandarin programs at ESF? Would it be comparable to the more established Mandarin bilingual focused primary schools? Okay, every ESF school is actually running potentially slightly different Mandarin program. But what I can categorically say is that ESF are not offering a bilingual primary school education, and quite a long way from it. I've drawn the comparison, it dawned on me fairly recently when I was reflecting on the differences on how language is taught ESF will use English in the teaching of Mandarin, whereas when you look at some of the bilingual schools and those that teach by immersion, obviously the language is the medium of instruction, and that's a fairly fundamental difference.
Yeah.
So not comparable at all.
Not at all. Not at all. And when you understand what an ESF school is working towards in terms of Mandarin, it's a very different destination than a bilingual focused primary school. In fact, let's use the term secondary school, because there's no testing at the end of primary school as to how on the language proficiency of a child. So it's really only at secondary school when that becomes when that comes into play. So children in ESF are working towards an IGCSE. Is it GCSE or IGCSE, Nick?
They'll do IGCSE.
IGCSE in Mandarin, and Mandarin is a foreign language or a second language, which is the same exam that children in rural England or anywhere would take, and they usually do that in a 4-year course. So it's really important. And another catchphrase that we have with parents is that if you don't know where you're going, then you don't know how to get there. So it's really important to understand, like if you're talking about an ESF Mandarin program, what is the destination? And understand that if a child is receiving a 9 at the top grade on an IGCSE of Mandarin as a foreign language or Mandarin as a second language, how does that compare with, what does that mean in terms of what language does the child have, and is that what you expect? Because the question actually makes me open up to thinking about just disappointments. The number of parents that genuinely don't understand what it is that they're applying for, and that they get in, and in which case they may be delighted and everyone's celebrating and it's happy days, but until 6 months, a year or 2 years later, they actually realize that what they signed up for is not what they expect. And that's really disappointing, because we get those coming back to us, and they weren't our clients in the beginning, of course, but it's disappointing when parents expect something that's not then delivered. So it's really, really important to critically evaluate the program. And I think I'm just going to say it, because I mean, I say it in public, to seminars, and Nicola's looking nervous now, like, what am I going to say? But you would agree with me. I mean, in general, and look, there are always exceptions to the rule, but in general, an international school is not going to deliver a strong Mandarin program. And that's not what they do. That's not what they're there for. They're there to deliver an English medium program to international students. So there you go.
I think we're beginning to see some of the international schools do a slightly better job in addressing the Chinese that they offer. To be honest, it's a growing demand across all parents, but definitely something to really make sure you've done your homework. And as Ruth said, what do you want the outcome to be from their Mandarin program? And in the schools that you're identifying going to fulfill those objectives. And if not, perhaps you need to revisit that list of schools.
Yeah, thank you for your question, Leslie. Let's move away from Mandarin if we can, and let's talk about spray and pray. Okay. So you go ahead.
Okay, so spray and pray is the term that we've started giving to families that potentially end up sat in our office, that will tell us that I've applied to 7, 8, 9, believe it or not, sometimes 10 schools before they've spoken to us.
For twins?
Yeah, sometimes. So we're looking at potentially $40,000 worth of application fees for a family with twins that they've paid. And it's spray and pray, because we've applied to lots of schools indiscriminately in the hope and with a prayer that one of them will take us. And the reality is, if you've applied to that many schools, the odds are in your favor. It's likely that one of them will accept you. But we also see time and time again that people reach out to us and will say, oh, we've received an offer from school X. What should I do?
And we've seen it in the Facebook group this week. I mean, we moderate that group, the Hong Kong Schools group. You might be watching this live in that group. And the number of threads that are started, I mean, I've received an offer from XYZ school. Is it any good? And Yeah.
Potentially yes, potentially no. We don't know your child. But really the take-home message is you do not need to be applying. We'd always say no more than 3 schools.
Right.
Potentially it can be less than that if you've done your homework and you know what you want. But it should definitely not be more than 3. And you should be pleased, if not thrilled and delighted, if you get an offer from any one of those 3. And you really shouldn't need to be asking, do I want to send my child there? That should have come at the very beginning of the process.
Right. And what was the case we had recently where you'd applied to one school and one school only?
So again, we obviously meet a lot of families, and often, you know, I will be very honest with families and say, you know, you absolutely go ahead and do it yourself. But one particular family that had one school in mind for their children, and they decided that absolutely, you know, go ahead and apply, but you might want to be aware of what your other options are and when you would need to consider them. Unfortunately, the family were unsuccessful in securing offers from the one school that they'd applied to. And obviously, by the time that result had been received, a number of the other application deadlines had passed and were no longer even an option for that family. So both ends of the spectrum. Applying to one is probably not enough, depending on which one, and applying to 10 is too many, and is going to result in offers that you don't want to receive, and potentially bills for tens of thousands of dollars in deposits.
Right. I mean, so parents think that they need to spend this amount of money. Like, that's just what you have to do. You have to play the game. You have to be in it to win it. And what we would say is you absolutely do not. It's going to cost you much more money and an awful lot more stress, and potentially also burning bridges with certain schools, because if you're generating all these offers, you can only take one of them at the end of the day. So definitely we say 3 and three applications to the right schools in the right way at the right time. The right time is the easy part, of course, but that's what we do. Yeah. So let's maybe wrap up. Parting words, Nicola. Top tips, pieces of advice for parents, either what to do or what not to do.
Obviously, it's going to vary depending on the age of your child. I think now is a really key time for those that are looking potentially at changing or entering schools in August 2021 to really start doing your homework and start doing your due diligence as to what you want. Some awkward questions. We often joke with some of our clients that we should also offer marriage counselling, but understand what you really want for your child, and then the process needs to begin as to identifying which of the schools we have in Hong Kong that are going to meet those needs.
Right.
But get ahead, plan early, because hopefully proper planning will prevent the need for excessive numbers of applications and stress.
Right. And just a last question, because it's just come into my head. I mean, parents often they're on the Facebook group, they're asking questions. They have a reasonable amount of I wouldn't say knowledge, but they're sourcing a lot of ideas and comments from different people. What's the difference if we work with a family on a personal basis than if family does it on their own?
First, simplistically, obviously, we can save a lot of time and effort for those families and keep it very simple. I'd like to think that we block out a lot of the background noise. As a parent myself, when you talk to other parents, and rightly so, parents love the school that their child is enrolled at, and that's not necessarily the best school for your child. So it's very much about taking that into account and giving some objective advice.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Nicola. Thank you, Tiffany. Thanks for your comment. And thank you to Jaskaran, who just said very good. Thank you to Mofe. All of you, if you have comments and you are watching this on catch up, please do go ahead and we will get to them. Thank you, everybody, for watching. That's been Monday Mix. And I just need to get myself organized. Talk amongst yourselves. We're going to be back next Monday. We don't have a guest lined up yet. So if there is somebody that you would like us to interview or a topic that you would like us to talk about, please also comment below. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week.